So welcome back to episode 11 of Spiritual Shadowboxing. I cannot believe this is episode 11. Um, what are we talking about today? People are questioning everything, right? They want answers to know how to deal with this in-between moment. This time that can be really, really uncomfortable, whether that's physically kind of locked in our spaces still, really not sure if it's safe to go outside or interact with loved ones, whether that's the in-between moment politically or something else. Our guest today is Cindy Carrandi, who's the founder of Tribe&Kind. It's an innovative change consultancy for companies, teams, and individuals. She's got a really interesting mix where she combines Chinese medicine, systemic coaching techniques, and equine education methods. Cindy, thank you so much for joining us today on Spiritual Shadowboxing.
Thanks so much for having me, Kelly. I appreciate it.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about, because that's a whole mixed bag of things.
No, it is.
And I love it.
It's so interesting to hear when you say that, because I've changed so much, as many of us have in this time, and how I work and how I serve in the world. And I've actually expanded more on my one-on-one coaching and working with animals and nature in my own personal development. So that is, but yes, I still touch upon, that's a good foundation to where I'm at. But I think now in so much of this unknown, and like we're talking about this in between moments that we're all experiencing, I found that serving and helping people with some tools and offering perspectives and collaborating, that's a place that I'd love to be in.
Yeah. And a lot of us here do coaching in all different facets. So I think it's a really interesting moment where we probably are all dealing with very similar things with our clients, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone is having some reaction, whether it's emotional or financial or, whatever the case might be. So it's really interesting for us to have this conversation and talk about what grounds us, right? Like what are the techniques and the different things that we can really reach in and find our own resources for, and then in turn serve other people. I think it's important. I think it's important because this is kind of a model. We love to model on this show, right? So it's a model for people to kind of really see what's around them, what do they have within them, and what are some other things that they might pick up from some of the techniques or tactics that we use.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things I think, techniques, I think, this is a time people really are seeking how, right? We know theoretically where things are, and we hear so many different perspectives of, what we should be doing. And I think that, like you just said, it's like, how do you get back to self again? How do you get to connect to, what truly matters, the knowingness. And I think, there's so many tools, right? There's meditation where there's quieting the mind and, just really removing yourself from day to day. And I think especially in this time when we've had a lot of lockdown and during these 9 months where we haven't been social as much as we'd like to be, finding stillness in different ways, finding that connection. And I myself, my biggest gift is being immersed in the redwoods and nature and just taking walks and observing wildlife. Quite frankly, I find that when I'm in this moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to get work, I want it to go back to where it was. That's a lot of what we think about. And then just leaning in and observing and watching how nature and wildlife, they adapt, they coexist. There's a flow, regardless of what's going on in the environment. And I think that's a lesson that I've learned so much, especially this past year.
Yeah, I love that you say that, Cindy, because, when you were speaking about the wilderness and the nature and the animals around you, I kept getting a vision of an eagle, because one of the things that we can help ground ourselves with meditation and breathing is remembering and trying to become that witness, that observer of ourselves, of our own emotional, physical state. And if you know, if we can rise above like the great eagles do and be able to have such a broader perspective of what's going on, and not that narrow mindedness of our ego and where, like how we want it to be the way it was, but do we really?
Right.
So I think that reminder through meditation and breath to tap into that voice in your head that it is not you, it is the observer, the witness, is a way that, we can take the lessons from nature and apply it to ourselves to help us ground. So it really is beautiful,
I thought about that actually a little bit in a different context this week. Like this week, let's just like put it out on the table. This week has been highly emotional. Right? And I'm not, I used to be very stressed out in my former life when I owned a larger company and all of that. And I haven't been used to that in like over 4 years. And so now this week was one of the first times where I really started to feel that in my body, this like anxiety and like almost like on the verge of panic attack.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Like something bubbling up inside of me. And I was like, what is this? Like, this is so foreign to me. And so instead of really focusing on that, I think what I started to do was like consciously say, okay, let me observe.
Yes.
Let me try to step outside of myself and observe what is actually going on. Because what is reality, right? And I was doing things that some people could classify as distraction. But I thought, a different perspective could be that I was actually being very present. So I was doing things like repotting plants, right, in my house.
Yeah.
I was making soup, like things
that
really require you to be focused and be present on the act. And it wasn't that I was necessarily like, yes, I was distracting myself because I wanted to be busy, quote unquote, but it was still something that was sort of like nesting, still a little bit of self-care, still connecting to nature and food that was grown from the earth. And so that's kind of how I thought about it. But I think if I was turned inward so much, I would have missed that, right? I wouldn't have thought about it so much as being present and connecting. I don't know. I just throw
like
that out
Fereshta
there.
always says in earlier episodes, it's about those rituals that we create, right? That calm the nervous system. And it's so funny because I wanted to make spaghetti sauce because I'm like a nod to my Italian ancestral lineage. I'm like, when I was feeling the same way with you, like I had to go to bed the night of the election because I was like really like feeling the stress. And I'm like, this is not like me. And the next day I woke up, I'm like, I want to make a spaghetti sauce and I want to make meatballs. I didn't, but I tried to do other things and other techniques that we all kind of have in our toolbox to prepare ourselves and to ground ourselves. So,
yeah. Fereshta, were you going to say something?
I was, sorry. I was saying I feel that's the wisdom of the body.
Yeah.
Because when we're working with our hands, when we're creating, whether it's making bread or spaghetti sauce or planting, we are essentially going back to the body and allowing the mind to just sort of follow, just settle a little. Then I'm also on the other end of the spectrum where I'm like, oh, something's coming up, like dig into it, and I found for me, the feelings that were evoked the night of the election just had me go, oh, I've got some emotional debris from the last election.
Yeah.
I've got some PTSD, and not to say that mildly, but like the anxiety remembers. And let me sit with that. And that for me helped. And I also agree with like, let's make something and use our hands and use our body. And I don't even think it's distraction because it's almost self-regulating. It's very intentional.
Yeah.
No, I love that you say that because I wrote a manifesto and one of the first things I said is do something with your hands every day because there's something with the act of creation in whatever small thing that might be that not only gets you present, but you're connected, right? You're connected, you're creating, it's coming from within. There's something really beautiful and that's a great place to be in because especially in a time when you're stressed and you're feeling like we're so conditioned we have to occupy every moment of our day, right? And that's we started off talking about that and how are you coming back to this in-between moment, how can you in that moment not feel like you have to do something? I mean, there are things, but just maybe just looking out the window for a moment and watching the birds that we talked about or something where you're not feeling like you have to do something. It's not all on your shoulders. So yeah.
It's back to that integration though, right? Like, because you just said like using your hands, that's like a creative thing. It's a generative thing. That is actually, more of a divine masculine act, right? To
Divine.
generate
Yeah.
and create, right?
Yeah.
And so it is this balance of like sitting and reflecting and the being energy, but then also creating and being generative, right?
Right.
So I
That's
think there's something to that where like a lot of times that integration just in and of itself can really start to move things through the body. That's what works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the being and doing, how you explain that so simply. With there's so much
Not
talk
me,
about,
it's Buddhism.
I know.
I can't
Well,
take credit.
I won't say you said it. Okay, you don't have to take credit.
I'm just the messenger.
You're a beautiful messenger of that message that needs to be reminded every day that it is simply being or doing, stripped down.
And
You can go
and not or.
Huh?
And
And
not or.
being and doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody knows that better than the founder of Tribe&Kind.
And it's interesting, this movement, because I'll tell you, I speak to so many people right now that are, their businesses are stagnant and they're having to constantly figure out, how do I adapt and how do I change? And it's as silly as it says, but like Soul Cycle for me, just that class of movement, really moving my body, doing that kind of, it changes my life. I mean, if I don't do that every day, any kind of stagnation, any kind of held or stuck energy that I have in my body, like I find that has been probably one of my most therapeutic things that I've been doing, especially in these times of and being able to connect just with people. That's another thing. I mean, especially here in California, Northern Cal, we have had so many things happening between fires and just, we had a lot of lockdown early on, and just being able to go out into a space, even if it's in the parking lot with headphones on, with all of us in different spaces, but just like energetically moving with others at a distance is so powerful. It sounds so crazy because you're on a stationary bike, silent disco style with your headsets on, but it's just such a beautiful thing. I was thinking about that yesterday because I go very early, and it's like you watch the sunrise and you're out in this parking lot, but it's powerful to see where we're all distanced, but we're connected. And I see such a shift in people from the beginning to the end, and they can take it through their day. So I think that's just to find something like that you can generate that energy from within, and also, from others. I think that we're in that time where we're needing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cindy, I'm hearing the co-regulation piece. I notice with my clients, the ones who are introverts, they self-regulate. They can regulate internally a little better. Yeah. And those who are extroverts are used to co-regulating with others and are having a bit of a harder time. But I love this distinction that it's not social distance, it's physical distance in a communal setting. Just because I felt that was a disservice when that phrase came out.
Yeah, I agree.
And we're such social beings that if they had just said physically distance, communally, it might have had a different implication when we were all in some fear energy.
And acceptance.
Yeah.
Well, this comes back to why language is so important, right? Like we talk about that all the time. That's my favorite thing to talk about. It is the most important thing. What we say, how we say it, the terms that we use, I mean, they have implications, right? And so that's a perfect example. Social distance versus physical distance, that could elicit some response that, I don't know, just people have to that's another thing that people have to deal with, right? And it's completely unknown to them, right? They just know what it feels like. So in a time of connection, when this is I think COVID was probably the thing that most, in my lifetime anyway, that most showed how interconnected we really are, as a species. And so you can't discount that. And so if there is that interconnectedness, and we need connection and just social gathering and social connection to survive, because we as humans, right, like we're social beings, we need that that sense of belonging, right? These are basic needs. And so to say like social distance, I feel like, yeah, it definitely, I agree with you, it was a disservice to use that term, but here we are.
It was like a social experiment in some ways too. And I think if we use the words physical distance, I think people would get behind it and understand it. And we talked about this before about the non-locality in quantum physics, about energy and energy exchange. My biggest thing at the beginning of COVID was, and I did it myself, like when you saw people on the street, you looked down. Wearing a mask or not, you looked down. You didn't want, all of a sudden I was afraid to like look somebody in the eye anymore. And
I wonder, I'm sorry to cut you off. I just had a thought though. I was wondering, was there some kind of like shame response with that?
Maybe that's why people were looking down. Yeah. I didn't even think about that.
That's like what came up for me was like, I don't want to look you in the eye because like I have a mask on, you have a mask on. We can't commune the way that we would. I might even be smiling at you, but you can't see it. So like there's a lot of loss with that. And so maybe there was some kind of like shame or guilt related to that. I don't know. It's just a thought.
I feel that feels right to me, Kel. I think that I never really thought about it that way, but when you said it and I kind of felt it in my body, the reasons why maybe I did it, I think that was it. And then I would force myself to look at people in the eyes when I was walking around, and they're like, oh, there's that crazy girl again, walking around looking at everybody in the eyes. But, I think that, that was at the very beginning, when maybe the first 3 months of, when everybody was, just didn't know what was going on. And I think there was so much fear as well. And I think there's less fear, but I still think it's still a lot of control being, with the words that we use, and us as people that coach and talk to people and have a platform, we have to, let people know that it's not a social distancing. We have to go back to reminding people of that message.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if I can get behind. I would love to get behind the idea that there's less fear. I actually feel like it's the opposite. I feel like there's more fear.
Well, with the election now,
it's the election. It's COVID cases going up more every single day. This whole second wave thing. I think it's more fear. So we feel like we have.
What do you guys think about that? Anybody else feel like it's more fear, or?
I don't know about that. I feel like people are threadbare, right? Like 8 months in, I think that people are worn. So we lose our form. Even those of us who have resources and know how to take care of ourselves, 8 months in, now we're getting into an endurance test.
Right. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah. So I think there may be fear, but I feel mostly I'm connecting with people who are just threadbare, who are just like
fatigued.
Yeah.
For sure.
That COVID fatigue, they talk about that, and now it's the election fatigue. Everybody has these little phrases they like to throw out, but I think with the fatigue, I think people are less cautious. I think, and with this, the spikes of numbers, it's a virus that is new. Nobody has immunity to it. Everybody, it's going to be highly contagious. So when they keep talking about new cases, I really want to get the information from the media about, well, what's the percentage of people getting it and getting sick, and because that's the truth. That's the knowledge we need to have to be protected and feel safe. Just throwing out numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but I don't know how you feel all about that.
It's interesting that you say, like, I find the media is fueling the fear.
I do too.
Yeah. And I don't listen to it. I'm going to be honest. I have friends that are doctors. I have friends that are out. Like, there's so much corruption around reporting of cases, and we don't know what's true and what's not.
Right.
And
it became politicized, right? I don't think anyone can say that it didn't.
Completely. And I mean, here I've noticed a lot more rebellion going around, right? People are over it. It's natural. It's like we've been caged for so long. We're not meant to be that way. So we're wanting to express, and people are acting out. And I think just a perspective, at least that I hold, is most likely most people will get this. Like, it's going to happen. I mean, I feel like I had it on early, very, very early on. Not everyone's going to die, you know, like, I think that there's like this just a little, and I know that sounds, I have a family member that passed away from COVID. I question a little bit if that was 100% true, but you know, like, there are, and I know people that have, however, there are many people that are getting it and surviving too. So this is just a moment where we're experiencing an odd virus that, you know, similar to things that have happened, the plague, many things in our past, and we've moved on as a human race. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that sounds very, you know, people don't want to hear that, but I just feel like there is a time now where I believe life, it's like, it's a cleanup, right? Things are changing, shifting, and I don't know. I think myself too. I'm like, if it's my time, it's my time. I don't know. Like, that's just something. And there was something freeing about finally just sitting with that and just saying, I'm okay with it, you know, like, and I don't know. That's just where.
Were you, when you had it, were you worried that you weren't going to make it?
I had it so early on, I didn't know what the hell it was. My sister and I had it. We were deathly ill for about 3 weeks. And it took me about 4 weeks after that to get my cardio back again. I was like, why am I so out of breath? You know? So no, I wasn't worried, but I think, look, I've gone through disease where I had breast cancer about 8 years ago. So I've been in that moment where, you know, you just don't know. You do what you can in those moments and move on. But I believe we're way more resilient as a species than we give ourselves credit for.
And I do too. You know, and Kelly, I did watch that, a little bit of that. I didn't watch all of the film that you sent to me, but I did watch some of it. And, you know, it had, you know, an illustration of how the virus spreads in the air and touch, and the virus was red in the animation, and it's on the table here and all that. And I was watching it, and I'm like, we have to coexist. Viruses have been here before us. We need to coexist with viruses, coexist with bacteria, fungus, everything that shares the earth with us is part of the earth plane. And, you know, again, we talked about giving our power away. You know, we have given our power away to this virus. We've given, and then the same with the election. We have given our power away to two parties that, you know, are so polarizing, and there's so much, you know, divisiveness about it. But, you know, the fact is, and like you said earlier, I feel, and I know when I say this, it gets people mad, whoever wins, it's a transitional period and it will be okay. You know what I mean? And people say, oh, you can't compare the two. But the thing is, I'm not allowing these people, if Trump wins, you know, maybe we will get together and become stronger and understand that the change, like what I read in the poem before, is the old ways no longer serve. And maybe that
like it'll be more like a wake-up call, you mean?
Yes, I feel if Trump gets, I felt if Trump got reelected, it would continue the wake-up call, you know, because we had the wake-up call with him for years. COVID took away all our distractions, so we could see the corruption. We could see that the paradigms are shifting and changing to accommodate the, you know, as a spiritual person, the ascension of the human race, or just the evolution, if you don't want to use that word, of the human race. You know, if Biden wins, I think we might get a little placid again. But I still think, the movement has started and nothing's going to stop it. That's what I mean when I say it doesn't matter. We are changing, we are evolving. These paradigms, the ways of the old no longer serve us. So that's why I say that. And people that are really for Biden gets really upset with me. And I'm like, you know, I'm not saying that they're the same or comparing to them, but I'm just saying the movement of our evolution as our species, as us as a human race, is going so fast right now, it's not going to matter.
Yeah, I think your comment is just about depoliticizing everything and looking at like what is good for the greater good of all.
Exactly, for the human race.
Yeah.
Hashtag human race.
And to your point, you know, if Biden wins, I think it's dangerous to think that he's going to save everything.
I
right?
know.
Like
Well,
there's so much expectation, right? And it's almost like, in some ways, does that really matter? I mean, I think that's our core issue here is our consciousness, right? The collective consciousness. Like, we need to change, right? It's not just about the president.
Exactly.
It's much of what you're talking about, Kelly. Our behaviors, how we're being, how we so don't respect our planet and the world,
like each other,
even each other. Exactly. I mean, that's really, I believe, like what's happening right now. And Kelly was talking about, it's like the wake up is, you know, we are destroying amazing animal species right now. I mean, it's been going on, but it's like, if you really look at it, it's sad, right? Because of greed, because of things that we think we need and we don't appreciate. I mean, I personally have such a reverence for life and for animals and species. And when I see what we do just for sport, it's, you know, we don't have to get too much into that, but I think it's even with each other, you know. I mean, the other night I was looking into my garden and I saw, literally in my garden, I saw a coyote, a fox, a raccoon, and a skunk. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is not going to end well. You know, like all these different kinds of species, like that skunk, I was so, and I literally, my heart, I was like, oh my God, the skunk, you know, like, and you know, they all looked at that skunk and they ran. And that skunk pranced around in my garden. And I thought, what an interest, right? You know, like the one with the least, like a powerful weapon, but you know, like the most unlikely. But even the fact that they just all kind of coexisted and just, they may or may not want to be with each other too long, but there was a moment of respect. And that's why I always say I go to nature and then just, there's so many lessons there of like unlikeliness. You know, I don't know. I feel like it's a time now. It's urgent to really see the beauty in each other and the world around us. And that's our moment. That's our opportunity.
It is very true. Very
true. That's a great segue. Actually, I had a question about when you were talking about, when I said in the introduction about your equine education methods. I'm really curious about that because I've had my own experiences with, you know, horses, actually wild mustangs. And I just did want to spend a couple of minutes on that because I was curious, and you kind of teed that up nicely without knowing it.
Yeah, no. So, you know, it's interesting that you talk about that because I haven't, you know, especially this year with most of the coaching in person and even with the horses and the ranch that I've worked at, she has had to shut down a lot. So we haven't done as much as that, but that was just, you know, my experience with horses. I mean, I grew up riding a bit, and then I did a equine experience in Miraval, and that was such an amazing opportunity to just really become aware of how I'm being, you know. I mean, that's what the horse is really doing, right? They're a mirror, they're reflecting, you know, because you've worked with horses. And but at the end of it, the horse brings out the best, right? There's no judgment there. Right. It's allowing you to love yourself and how you're being, to get clear, you know, and why it's so many people say that they forgot how to love themselves, you know. And that's like, I mean, it's so powerful to see when people actually just something clicks in them, you know, in the moment in a session with a horse where they're realizing like the horse is just showing you who you are. It's not about anything else other than that. And it's a very powerful moment. So I highly recommend it for anybody in a moment where they are seeking, and it's on, you know, we always joke, we say it's horse time, right? People think horses, they're gonna do what they want to do with, like, you know, and they're gonna take their time, and we just have to, you know, again, reflecting back to that in between moment. I mean, they are the masters of that, of being okay and just waiting for the shift to happen naturally and not forcing. Nothing's being forced. It's a natural thing that's happening.
Very organic. That's, I mean, I couldn't have said it any better. That was verbatim my experience. Working with wild mustangs last November, so about a year ago. There was one in particular who I was working with, and these are wild mustangs, so people don't ride them. You're not putting a saddle on it, right?
Mhm.
And I'm grooming this horse, and this horse is enormous, right?
Wow.
Wild animal. And that in between moment of like fear,
Yeah.
and also it mirroring, like, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you to be my leader in this moment, even though I'm bigger, even though you're smaller than me. And I'm going to trust that you're not going to hurt me. I'm going to like let you in. And I literally had this moment where I was able to put my chest against his chest.
Wow.
And I mean, that the size difference is about 12 or 13 times the size difference between a human heart and a horse heart.
Yeah.
And then you can actually feel the beating. It's like a drum up against
Wow.
you.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And in that moment, I just started tearing. And it was like, something clicked exactly like you just said. And it was like, I had never realized that I didn't actually love myself until that moment, until that mirror moment. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I mean, it was like unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I think it's really powerful. And I think it just speaks to like the power of nature and the reflection of that. And, I don't know. I mean, I hope that we can all wake up to that, to all of these things that, again, back to the interconnectedness and the fact that like nature, I mean, not horses necessarily, but like nature at a larger scale really relies on us at this point to be its protector, to be its steward. And I really hope that we just do not continue to turn our backs the way that we have. I mean, it's definitely one thing that I am super passionate about as well.
Yeah. No, it's
That was a
important.
beautiful story, Kelly. And I just keep thinking about what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, that coherence, that heart coherence, right, Cindy? And when he would have the meditations with 600 people in a room, somebody would start the tempo by just doing this one against their heart.
Yeah.
And then everybody in the room's hearts would beat at the same. And the power in that, and the power that you must have felt next to that horse's heart, like, I mean, I could just, I think you brought tears to my eyes just by telling me that story. And, I'd love to have that experience at some point, because I think I would personally feel very fearful at first, even though I rode when I was younger as well.
Yeah, I did too. But
and
still,
I think I would be like,
It's very
I would be a little fearful. It would be, a challenge for me to like trust and let go.
Well, and I'm also just really feeling touched because it's a trust walk on both sides relationally, right?
Trust walk.
In any relationship, if it's done that way, where you're seen, you're heard, you're soothed, you're supported, you can settle into yourself, right? You can feel your nervous system go, okay, this creature or another being has my back, and I feel it in my nervous system. And then being accepted feels available. That's my sense of it.
Yeah.
Perfectly put. Perfect.
Trust walk. Love that.
So how do we create a trust walk for humanity? There's a small question for you.
There you go. Well,
that's true.
Like, how do we get on the same page? I know that I'm saying this rhetorically. I don't think that we're going to.
No, it's not quite.
But it's
Well, I
something
think
to really think about.
It comes about with first is that healing. Like when you with that horse and you felt, like you said, you didn't realize the self-love that you were lacking, right? It was a mirror to you, right? I think the first step is individually looking into whatever is the mirror in front of you to understand, like as you talk, the wounds, the shadow that needs to be healed individually first, and then as a collective, and start off small, community, tribe and kind, then the world, so we start off small, baby steps on that walk. And then we come together larger and larger. It's like, I always get this vision sometimes when I do meditation. Do you guys remember in the 70s, I'm not that old, but I don't know why in the 70s, there was that campaign where they had cut out people and their hands were, it was Hands Across America.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The little paper doll.
Yeah, the little paper dolls.
Yeah.
So I always, sometimes when I go in my meditation, think about that. Think about how, like with non-locality, with energy, that we could link hands together and hearts together and find that coherence. I mean, that's the beginning,
Yeah.
Beginning.
I think for me, it's about maintaining curiosity, right? Like, so what I mean by that is sort of like understanding that other people are that mirror for us, and then pausing instead of being reactive and just dialing up the curiosity.
No, that's
like,
that's
oh,
true.
you're on a different political party than me, or you feel this way about abortion, or, whatever the cases may be. Why do you feel that way? Like, tell me more about that. Be invitational about it, because we can't get anywhere. We can't heal anything if we don't understand where each of us is coming from. So I think, like, going forward, this is about having uncomfortable and difficult conversations and inviting them, like actually starting them, initiating them for the rest of our lives. I that's what I think is it's
Oh,
gonna
I love that you say that, Kelly, because I did a mini documentary on a pro-life group, and I'm pro-choice. That's my stance. And it was so interesting to be curious, right? To have that conversation when everything in my body was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this is what's being said and that they truly believe this. And then I realized, I was like, well, what is, like, how can I shift my energy around it a little bit? How can it be something where being okay with not having to agree, but also that we're both humans, and not, shaming and blaming and making it right or wrong. And that, I think that was one of my most challenging moments, because I felt so strongly on the opposite end. And I think it's interesting with the election going on, we're sensing that, right? People are very strong Trump supporters and very strong Biden supporters. And, we will be divided regardless of who wins this election.
Exactly.
If we don't come to what you were just saying, it's like getting curious about each other, being okay with having differences, and that we have a lot of things in common as well, right? Like, there are other possibilities other than one subject matter. So yeah.
Those are all really good points, really good points. And I think the numbers, like, as you see the numbers coming in and, the final tallies being counted and everything, you see how divided we really are. I mean, it is really almost a 50-50 split, right? And so I think that it makes our jobs a little harder, but I do think that the answer is leaning in and just living a life of curiosity, because I mean, I just don't see another way. Because if we keep going the way that we're going and holding so fast to our own beliefs and just challenging, we're just essentially gonna, we're never gonna get anywhere. And so I think it's about changing the language. It's about unlearning. It's dialing up that invitation to be curious. It's all of those things.
I also think it's being teachable, because if we're just as divisive as 4 years ago. Whatever we've been doing isn't working.
It's worse. I think it's worse now.
Right. And in any relationship, if both people are digging their heels in and not hearing each other, I'm not going to probably agree with a lot of people who have voted for Trump, but it would be really honest work for me to stop digging my heels in and for them to stop digging their heels in. Because I was saying to a friend last night, those commercials, probably in Norway or something, where it took all these very different people and put them on the outskirts in a square, and then had circles and said, okay, how many of you have a daughter? And those people went into that. Or how many of you are concerned about an elder parent? And you start to look at all these people who, sure, we could probably argue at the top of our lungs about some issues, had at least some common humanity that could bring about some decency in each other.
Such a good conversation. I love it. Hopefully this gives people a little bit to chew on. Cindy, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. This is great. And I will post notes to a couple of places where people can find you in the show notes.
Thank you so
much. And thanks
everybody.
everybody.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for your conversation.